Welcome. Or perhaps it's a background like this. Hey, everyone. First of all, I just want to welcome you over to this episode now that we're back in this strange, scary kind of backdrop here. I just want to welcome you to Voices of Victory if you haven't been on the show before, if you haven't come on to the show. This is where we are going to dissect the patterns, the mindsets, and the moments that actually trap us. And yes, we got this weird background here. So, in today's episode, we're going to go deep into this one. We're going to peel back the layers. We're going to dissect those patterns. We're going to go into the mindset that quietly poisons communication and distorts perception. It distorts emotional immaturity and specifically how it warps reality. So that's why this wonderful episode is titled, We're Back to This Again. And you can see why I've labeled this episode the warped mirror of emotional immaturity. And we're going to walk through those real life dynamics, like when a simple boundary turns into emotional chaos, and how to keep your grip on clarity when someone else is living in a mirror of their own emotions. So let's go ahead. And here we are, like the perfect family. Look at this. It's just wonderful, right? Everybody's just around the television, just like the 1950s, right? So, yeah, let's flip the script here. Just imagine that you're watching a movie and suddenly the screen starts to go fuzzy, goes a little fuzzy, right? Isn't that interesting? And what does this actually do? Well, just imagine for a second. Just imagine you're in that television show, you're in that movie. Let's talk about it. Just you're watching a movie and suddenly that screen goes fuzzy. That's what emotional immaturity does to reality. Let's actually dive in to it. So a daughter says to the mother, "Hey, mom, I'd appreciate it if you just called before stopping by." And the mother replies, "Well, you know, I must be the absolute worst mother of the world then." Yeah. So here's what happened. Now, here's actually what happened with that. Good old mom, right? Well, the daughter just set a boundary. She set a boundary. It's simple. She said, "Mom, I appreciate it if you called before stopping by." Okay, the daughter had set a boundary, a reasonable one. Wasn't very difficult either. But the emotionally immature mom doesn't hear the request. Instead, she hears rejection of her identity, emotionally immature. Why though? Because for emotionally immature people, reality is filtered through how something makes them feel. It hurts and it hurts bad. And you know what? If it feels good, it's actually right. And that's all there is to it. Right. So the daughter set a boundary and felt right about doing it. And she knew that the boundary was a reasonable one. It wasn't difficult, but mom was being emotionally immature. And now keep in mind, both of these people are above 18. Okay, just want to share that. It doesn't matter what you actually said, the truth gets drowned in their emotional reactions. That's what it's all about. The truth literally gets drowned in whatever emotional reaction they're feeling. So let's take a look in our rearview mirror about that, because quite honestly, let's flip the script on this. Let's completely flip the script on this. Let's understand some key takeaways in the rearview mirror here. Emotionally immature people interpret neutral statements as emotional attacks. Boundaries, in this case, are perceived not as a request, but they're perceived as an actual rejection. And they live in a world where emotion equals fact to them and discomfort equals wrong. So, objective reality is when we could all look at things objectively. We don't flavor how they are. So, objective reality is often optional to these people when it's filtered through an emotional lens. Literally optional. So, let's jump out of the rearview mirror. And here we are. Yeah, this is where we are, the warped mirror, the egocentrism, if you will. So step right up. Welcome to the good old carnival of egos, because every mirror is literally warped and every reflection is a little bit off. This is not about reacting emotionally. It's about egocentrism, the inability to recognize perspectives beyond your own emotional landscape. It's about being objective. And objectivity is literally a lost art today and is literally a superpower as well. It's like when someone says, well, I feel slapped, even though you just said, just please, text me before coming over, right? They're not seeing you. They're actually seeing themselves in that pain, in that hall of mirrors, if you will, right? You're just a screen and it's projected right onto you. And that's the funny part about it, right? So their internal logic goes like this: I feel bad. That means you did something wrong. Therefore, I'm hurt and you're the villain. That's what that's about right there. So, this very egocentric reality is like the carnival mirror that we're all looking at here. You say one thing, but it comes back warped and distorted beyond the recognition. Yeah. So, what's the key takeaway in this particular section? Well, egocentrism literally blocks emotional maturity, because what it does is it prioritizes internal feeling over external truth. Or the emotionally immature people, they see others through their own emotional projections. So distortion becomes the norm for these people, and feelings override fact to these people. And empathy becomes nearly impossible because their intent is filtered through their pain. So it becomes really difficult for them to connect with empathy. So, yeah, let's take a moment. The party is over. It's absolutely over. Yeah, absolutely. You hear that? It's the sound of dead silence. And it's time to leave the funhouse and get real about what's actually underneath. Okay. So, this is where it gets interesting. It brings us over to our next piece, our next segment here, is what I feel is what I know. So let's get ready, literally ready for a reality check right here. Here's the deepest root of the issue. What I feel is what I know to be true. So this very belief, it governs everything. What I feel is what I know to be true. And it's incredibly dangerous in relationships. Why, though? Because it's the reason why emotionally immature people can't take feedback. They don't understand the concept of feedback. When you give the feedback, they attach it to their identity. So therefore, they get immediately upset. And that's why they resist boundaries. And it's why some people actually feel gaslit, if you will, right? So it feels like they're defending things that they never said or they never meant or whatever the case may be. So if someone feels hurt, they must be justified in their own mind. There's no room for nuance. There's no room for anything else. That, and that nuance is something that they can feel. But the fact is they could still be wrong about what it means. So it could be a feeling, but what that feeling means could actually be incorrect. Because there are people that say, well, those are my feelings. They're not wrong. Well, there are other avenues and other ways to actually look at that. Emotionally immature people, they equate feeling the truth with feeling. There's no distinction between them. Okay. They equate feeling with that very truth. Yeah. So we get into the talk about subjectivity and objectivity. And I've always expressed to people that objectivity is a lost art and it's also a superpower. This mindset of understanding, this mindset leads to poor emotional regulation, which means emotionally immature people have difficulty regulating their emotions and they get interpersonal confusion. They have difficulty dealing with other people. So it blocks growth because discomfort is avoided and it's not processed. They don't know how to feel their way through that discomfort. So reality gets rewritten by emotion and dialogue becomes defensive or destructive. Yeah, well, that door has opened and here we are. Yeah, we're going to have some fun here. So we want to wake up because that's reality knocking, and we literally just entered that door. So, what's the battle here? What's the actual battle here? It's not about fixing the emotionally immature person, it's about keeping your clarity when you share your values and when they try to distort everything. So, you have to be able to hold to your values and say, the reason why I value this is because. And if you don't want to explain yourself, that's fine. You can just simply lay down the boundary and express that that's important to you. And you don't have to go into detail. And I'd like you to honor that. You could say, like, but I want to know why. I'd like you to honor that. Why is important to me and not you. I don't have to explain myself, And I think people get hooked up in that they have to overshare and over explain, and they don't really need to. Because it's not about fixing that emotionally immature person. Because victory isn't always about confrontation. Sometimes it's holding the line on your boundary, even if they explode. Right. And sometimes it's not about reacting when they twist your words, because they might indeed do that. So when they ask why, I want to know why, I need to know why, that's their way to find the limitation of argument and try to manipulate that argument. So guess what? When they try to twist your words, it's going to become obvious. Sometimes it's realizing that they don't have the tools to actually see clearly and that you don't have to hand them the tools. You simply, this is my boundary. This is where I'm at. And you got to remember boundaries, just for the record. Let's talk about boundaries. And you can see these parking lines behind me in this rain. These are all boundaries. These are boundaries, limitations. They're there for a reason. They're there so you don't bump up into things, right? You don't hit someone else's car. You don't hit someone else's vehicle, or they don't hit you. It's kind of a little bit of both, right? And boundaries are not always verbal. They are not always verbal. We fall under this idea that they have to be verbal, and they really don't. They don't have to be verbal at all, right? And I mean, if you were to dive into, let's say, avoidant behavior, you would find that they throw up boundaries probably more than anyone, right? But what I want to, it's really, this is a battle for clarity, okay? That's it. So what's the battle here? It's not about fixing the emotional immature person. It's about keeping your clarity with your values when they start distorting everything, because that's what they'll do. So victory is clarity of your values, not control over others. So you stay anchored in your reality, even if others are spinning theirs and using their own projections onto you. So you're not responsible for convincing others of truth that they don't want. You're not responsible for that. Emotional distance and boundaries is going to be necessary when the distortion becomes consistent. You start to see that they're distorting certain things. And this is a very easy example, the whole mom thing. You could have called. Why did you come over, right? Well, I must be a bad mother then. Yeah, Again, it's just emotionally defensive. It's just not recognizing the boundaries. And again, this is assuming people are above 18 here in this scenario. So let's go ahead and go over some. So let's get a little grounded here. Let's get right down to the ground and let's deal out some strategies. No jokers, just the real stuff here. Okay. First of all, when you're dealing with somebody who's emotionally immature, you're going to want to use I language. I feel more respected when people actually text me before dropping in. All right. They may try to spin that, but make it very clear. You don't have to overshare, over explain everything. Emotional immaturity literally thrives on dragging you into their storm. That's the whole why. I want to know why. You need to explain to me. I don't need to explain shit to you. I don't need to explain anything at all. You need to acknowledge the emotion without enabling distortion. I hear this is upsetting you, and that is enough for me to understand. There's no need to agree with their false story. Like, you don't have to get into their whole story because they'll project these little narratives onto you. So walk away. Like, when you actually have to walk away, but like, you know what? If reality is being treated like Play-Doh, where they're pulling and stretching it, it's like you got to distance yourself, not dialogue. You know what? I'm going to excuse myself from this conversation as of right now. I'm leaving. Simple. Center yourself by speaking from your experience, not necessarily from defense. Avoid debating because you get hooked up in debating those distorted narratives. Those are emotional traps. They can lead you right down the wrong path. You got to remember emotional acknowledgement. If you acknowledge too much, you could be agreeing with a falsehood, right? So you have to protect your peace by stepping away from conversations that get way too chaotic. So it's time to pack those tools up. And now that we have our tools here in our trusty emotional garage, I think we need to take a look at a different avenue here. We're going to shine a light on what we've uncovered. No more shadows, just some light over here, just clarity. So let's tie this up together. Emotional immaturity doesn't look like someone throwing a tantrum in the store. It looks like grown people twisting your words, collapsing when confronted, or making every boundary feel like an emotional betrayal. But it's not your job to fix. It is not your responsibility to repair others. Okay. Now, some people may disagree with that statement based on family. They'll say, well, it's my responsibility. They fall into responsibility. I'm responsible for my mother. I'm responsible for my brother. I'm responsible for all that. And if that's the way you feel, that's fine. Just understand that the lens and the way you're seeing what's going on could have an impact on how you actually handle it. Okay. And it could be more about supporting them and allowing them to enable themselves rather than you enabling them. And again, every situation is different. You cannot template match every scenario. So let's just tie this up and put a pretty bow on it for this particular show. You got to remember, it's not your job to fix and repair people. Okay. And this could be in relevance to non family people. It is your job to see clearly, even when they don't, because that clarity in your own values, that's where your victory lives. Because they've done a study is that values are connected to self-esteem. And if people that don't have values usually have very low self-esteem. It's kind of a relationship there. So the final key takeaways of this show. Emotional immaturity isn't always loud. It's subtle, confusing, and can be manipulative. Could also be harmless, accidental. It could come across in the wrong way. Intention is a big deal. You start to see their intent, what their intent is, right? Clarity is the antidote to emotional distortion, knowing what your values are, standing on those values, understanding that they may be using emotions to distort certain things. You could love someone still in the name of distortion, like that does actually happen, right? Victory equals holding your values and truths steady, even when it's under emotional siege. Be able to stand your ground with that. And that's where boundaries come in. And boundaries don't always have to be verbal. So that's pretty much it. Victory isn't always loud, but it is clear. So next time, next time you want some peace in your life, yeah, understand victory isn't always loud, but it is clear. And I'll see you on the next video. Take care. Have a great day.